Bret Hart says wrestlers pretty much are all actors these days. So here is the quote. He was on Ariel Helwani's show, and he says, I try to watch the pay-per-views I find in a lot of wrestlers. I won't name anybody, but I find the wrestlers are more actors pretending to be wrestlers today than actual wrestlers. I miss the ruggedness of the characters, guys like Kurt Hennig, myself, Dynamite Kid, that whole era of wrestlers that broke into the business in the late 70s and early 80s. We were from the Harley Race Terry Funk generation, trying to copy them or mimic them. That's why I think the 90s was the best era. When I watch some of that old 90s wrestling, it was really good stuff. I find that today's wrestling is a little bit more about promos and your character on TV and not so much your work rate. There's that word again, work rate. I like guys that throw back a little bit more to the work rate. Roman Reigns is a guy that tries really hard to earn the respect of my generation and be more realistic and more credible and more believable, not so much of an actor. So he says wrestlers these days, especially in AEW, are merely actors pretending to be wrestlers. What do you think?
That's subjective. I agree with him to an extent. But I think if you want to put actor in there, you got to put stuntman in there too. Because he can't act unless he can do some of the stunts that where he looks like he got his head taken off. Or he jumped off the top and missed something, or took a gut shot, or took a clothesline coming off the top. He has a point, but that also goes back to his era, because we didn't, when I broke in, or when Bret broke in, it was more under the old school type style. And of course, WWE can do all this high flying stuff and abuse your body, but they're not going 7 days a week. We used to go 7 days a week. And if somebody come to see me, I used to take a pretty high backdrop. I don't know if people come to see that or not, but I would take a high one. I've been in some buildings, the light would be so low. The goal that night with some of the high flyers was to see if they could touch that light with their foot. They wanted to go so high they could touch the light. Then the light would be going like this. Whoop, whoop. And they would get back and said, I told you I could touch it. But anyway, you compare in different eras. And I think somebody that can tell a story and sell and do the bumps, I think that's what he's trying to get across. And I agree with him, because you gotta convince the fans. You don't got to convince yourself that it hurts, because you can do that real easy. You got to convince the fans that it really shook you up, and you do that by facials. And I guess that's the acting he's talking about, which Bret was never really good at facials at all. Even when he was working his face, really, if you watch him, his face never changed that much. So, and he's talking about taking it back to a different age. I don't know if you can take it back. And you can only have one guy take it back, or two guys take it back anyway, because you sell with your face. If you get hit hard, say in the gut, you just can't do this. You got to go, your face tells the story. And Bret, in his case, his face never told that. But I agree with what he's saying, with a little bit of some prerequisites in there, but he's got a point. But I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon.
So, not to put words in his mouth, but I sort of read it as the storytelling in the ring is missing compared to acting. They're doing the entrances and doing poses and stuff like that, but the actual storytelling in the ring is lacking more than it once was. And also, I guess people are pretending to be tough guys when, it seems the further back you go in pro wrestling history, the higher likelihood of a pro wrestler being an actual tough guy, exponentially rose as well. So maybe that's what he means. Maybe that he means that basically everyone's a performer and no one's sort of a grizzled, actual tough guy, brought up on the streets or whatever, unless they're, an athlete coming in, I guess. Like a Chad Gable, for example.
Yeah, but see, if you saw Chad Gable walk into a bar or walk into just anywhere, 7-Eleven or something, you would look at him and say, hey, he's not very big. His face doesn't look very tough, not very grizzled. But you can look in guy's face and sometimes say, I don't know if we want to mess with this guy. Just his face tells you that. And he may be the biggest wussy in the world. But if you look at him, you just leave him alone.
Like the Danny Hodge thing.
Yeah, Danny Hodge, he was, when he would walk in, you've heard about his grip, right? I shook hands with him one time and I didn't know it, and he knew I didn't know it. And I said, hi. I introduced myself, and he said, hi, I'm Danny Hodge, pleased to meet you. And he cranked down on that hand. I went, oh, God. He didn't do it much because he had to do it in a friendly way. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I can't help doing that. And then somebody said, you shook Hodge's hand. I said, well, yeah, what am I supposed to do? But I heard that he could take a guy, his hand strength was so strong. And what did he used to do with a can? He would crush a beer can with it full of beer. He'd pop the top. Hard to believe. And he was about 5'10", maybe 205, maybe. But nobody ever messed with him. But he never caused a problem anyway. But he was like one of the guys that you just didn't mess with. Because if somebody, when I started, and Bret would tell you the same thing, if he came in as a shooter, an old time shooter, he got a big, pathway. When he walked in, people would get out of his way. Like John Foley, I used to be a tag team with him. Bad to the bone. But if you talk to him, everything was a joke, everything, and he loved to drink, and he was as friendly as hell to somebody wanted to mess with him in the ring, and he just, and there were a few more. I've tested Pat O'Connor. Mm-hmm. I was friends with Pat, even though he was my boss. And I got him down one time, and I said, all right, you old bastard, get out of this. And I was tied up, and he said, as you were saying, and he laughed about it because I was playing around, but I was kidding him, like, get out of this, God damn it. But you don't know till you get those guys in there, and they're usually older guys that know what they're doing and know how to just lay you out. So, but I going back to what he said, Bret said, the acting has taken over a little more, I think. Well, maybe, what did he say? It's just what? What did he say?
Most wrestlers are actors rather than wrestlers these days. I want to ask you something.
But the acting is what made it work. That's what I'm saying. Okay, I got a choice of a guy knocking the shit out of me or acting. And acting is like when he goes to hit you, you go, whoa, and you get out of the way. I did a match like that one time. I was afraid of the guy's punch, and all, you know what we did for the finish?
A punch?
He hit me, and bam, I went down, and now they said, oh, that's what he was getting away from. And I got up, and I staggered around, and I left. We're going to talk about Tony Storm on the other.
Yeah, on the other one.
Dutch anything.
We will. To end it on, if today's era is not the greatest, in your opinion, what was the best era for purely in-ring work?
70s and the 80s. About halfway through the 80s, to WWE came along, and WWF came along, and that's when it started to slide. Because what WWE did, WWF did, is they killed all what I call the mom and pops territory. And, used to be a little group would go to a city and they draw, say, 1,000 people. Well, when WWE came along, they draw 300, 400, because who's going to watch just a walk-in, community theater when you got Broadway coming in 2 weeks. You're just not going to do it. So I think Vince killed the very animal he was trying to raise.
I'm going to give you one more quote from Bret, then we're going to shut down the show. I heard something a few months ago where Hulk Hogan was talking about me, and he said the problem with Bret Hart is that he really does think he was the greatest wrestler of all time. I remember thinking about that and going, yeah, maybe. That might be the most truthful thing that Hulk Hogan has ever said. When you watch a lot of the wrestlers today, you don't see anybody imitating Hulk Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior. You see a lot of wrestlers of today really trying their best to capture my style, or some of the guys that I work with, like Dynamite Kid or Kurt Hennig or my brother Owen. They're wrestling my style, and that's the biggest compliment I can get from today's generation. Do you think that's fair? Because he's not wrong, is he? I mean, Hulk Hogan was the biggest star of the 80s and 90s and partially of the 2000s maybe as well at times, or one of at least. And nobody imitates him. Which, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think it's a good thing because Hulk, they say he can work. I've never seen him work except maybe a little bit in Japan because he had to. But why work when what you were doing was working anyway? Why do that? Because he was, Hulk Hogan was the killer. Hulk Hogan was the stopper of a big heel wanting to take over, you know, and everything was geared toward Hogan. Like the same formula that they used with Bruno. You know, when Bruno was a champion, I mean, you would aim at this really big tough guy, and they'd aim it at Hogan, and that's where it was going to end up. And of course, they have their limits too. You know, they have their time in the flash pan, and then again, 10 years goes by, and it's got to change. But Bruno held the title the longest, like 8 years straight, right?
Yeah, I think it was like 7 or 4 years or something. Yeah,
I don't see how they could do that.
Vern Gagne did that as well. He had the AWA belt for like 5 years or something like that at one point.
And you know what that was caused by?
He was the owner.
Fear.
Yeah.
Fear of somebody coming in and getting over. So, and he feared that, well, there could be another group like WWE come in and take all my talent. And they possibly could because they took a lot of it, but they didn't take his son though, did they?
Greg, no.
And never took him.
No.
Because he weighed like 190 pounds because Vince was a really, really adamant toward the bigger guys as his father was, but the big guys didn't do nothing. The big guys actually didn't have a lot of personality either. But so he depended on Bruno and maybe 2 matches down below that to draw the crowd. And Bruno did for a long time. But anyway, what am I agreeing with here? What Bret said?
Basically, more people imitate Bret's style than Hogan's style.
I don't know. Because it is more wrestling, right? And you do more stuff. Yeah, I would say that.
I disagree that. I'd say more people imitated Shawn. Did more high-flying stuff.
I'm saying, but yeah, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm not necessarily Bret. But nobody did the Hogan style because hell, you got to be big and muscled up, and guys didn't do that.